I like to see a resume that's updated. I like to see that they are of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage, because not all companies have a system in place for you to tick that box. And then it just makes it easier and seamless. I like to see that when you have your history there, that where you finished your work, you picked up in the next job, or if you had to take time out because you might have studied or you might have been a carer, like, don't be ashamed to highlight those things, because what we want to see is we want to see a history of a work pattern as far back as we can go. I'm Kyra Galanti. I'm a Gubborn woman from the Goldfields region of West Australia, Kalgoorlie, Coolgardie and Southern Cross. The most important components of a resume is your details. They need to be updated, they need to be relevant, spelling, making sure you're spelling, use your spell check and Word doc. And if you have other outside commitments that you have done, like giving back to community, participated on a board, even helping out with school programs, educational programs, they're really good skills to actually highlight on your CV, because it also demonstrates that you don't only just work, you also have some part of you that does like to give back to your community, and you participate in another industry. That's another skill set to have.
My name is Rory Smeaton. I'm a proud Kerno man from Gippsland, Victoria. The most important components of a resume, I think, is to not be too text heavy and have succinct details. So I really like to see a bit of a job history, a bit of a summary of 2 or 3 lines of what you did, and then some dot points. I find that, if you've just got dot points, it doesn't tell the story. So I'd like to see, a bit of a story behind where you've worked before. You've got hobbies. I'd love to see, those things there. I'd love to see a resume that flows, something at the top, a bit of a brief description, your work history, skills, and go from there. I think they're really critical for something that's going to make you stand out, and something that it's easy to read on the eyes.
My name is Fallon Wanganeen. I am a proud Narungga man, so the Narungga peoples are of the beautiful York Peninsula in South Australia. For me, the most important components of a resume are to really highlight your recent work experience and the skills and capabilities, and even the achievements and deliverables that you've been able to do there. So people get caught up on putting what they studied at university and what their first job was, and I think the further you get away from university or school, the less important that kind of stuff is. What I'm really interested in seeing is where you're currently working, or where you have worked most recently, or even in the last couple of years. What you did as a part of that role, and again, any key achievements that you were able to tick off there as well.
My name is Desiree Kilduff. I'm a young Noongar professional living and working on Wiradjuri and Bunurong country. The most important components of a resume for a recruiter is making sure that it is up to date. So all the start dates and completion dates of your previous employment are accurate, so it just gives the employer or the recruiter a perfect overview of where you're at and where you've been, and why you're here today. On a resume, I believe it's really important for an employer or recruiter to see a clear objective. So that means you're outlining why you're perfect for this role, and that includes some of the duties or responsibilities outlined in the position description. So if you're able to match those two, it gives the employer a really strong impression of you as an employee with their organisation.
As a recruiter, and I think employers, we love to see a resume that's clean. Same text, same sort of fonts, nothing too out there. Coloured papers are alright, but online they're a little bit different compared to when you hand in your resume. Pictures are okay, not something on the whole page with your front page of your photo of yourself, but something that just stands out. It's easy to read. When I worked in the casino, we would get hundreds and hundreds of resumes, and sometimes you have to go through, and the ones that stood out were clean. We could read up front, we knew who the person was, the work they'd done before. Something that really stood out was that right up the front, instead of going through pages and pages of resumes. So making sure all the details you got are in the first couple of pages, and then it's really clean to read.
Personally, I love to see again, where you're working currently, and what you've been able to do and the capabilities and skill sets that that role requires, because I'm always looking at the job that I'm looking for. What are the core components of that, and how has your history got any kind of alignment to that as well? So I think without going too over the top, keeping it high level but detailed enough that whoever picks up your resume is going to be able to see that yes, this person is going to be a good fit for our organisation or for this particular role as well. I also personally like seeing a little bit of stuff around hobbies and interests as well. Obviously, when we get to meeting in a face-to-face or over the phone, you can get a feel for someone, but I always like seeing that personal side to things as well, because it can, when you've got 50 people that have applied for your roles and they're all talking through the same things, it can get a little bit repetitive. So I think that also brings out the human element of it as well.
I like to see a resume that's updated. I like to see that they are of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander heritage, because not all companies have a system in place for you to tick that box, and then it just makes it easier and seamless. I like to see that when you have your history there, that where you finished your work you picked up in the next job, or if you had to take time out because you might have studied or you might have been a carer, like, don't be ashamed to highlight those things, because what we want to see is we want to see a history of a work pattern as far back as we can go. The other part is making sure that you don't have a 10-page. We don't need a 10-page. We just need maybe a 2-page, and just highlighting your recent, moving back for the next couple of years, whatever you can fit on that 2-page.
For your resume to stand out, it's really hard thing to do, right? I think recruiters come across hundreds of resumes in a day, and there's only so many fonts and colours and bits and pieces that you can use. But I think having something that is well presented, and again, you don't need to have done a Microsoft Word or PowerPoint course to have been able to do this, but I think well presented, colours that make sense, clean and concise information. And like I said, in that leading section is, let me know what you're doing right now, because that's what I'm going to skim over. And if you haven't captured my attention in that first 40 seconds of me going through, then it's kind of on to the next one.
I believe that you can make your resume stand out by listing your achievements. So those achievements could be education, training, awards, or previous achievements in past roles. So it's really important to list these achievements to show, how you've been able to stand out from other employees or other people in your education or training spaces. It really gives the employer a good look at, what they can expect from you in the role.
What you can do to make it stand out is to be, really clean, in the sense that, you've got all the details that the recruiters have asked for in the position description. So if you've got work history, put that up the front. Hobbies and everything are great, but you can put them down the bottom. Understanding, the details of, contact details and everything up the top are really critical, because if we need to contact you, we'll need a couple of forms. So email, phone call, those sort of things. It might be if you've created a LinkedIn profile. They're great. So understanding what the recruiter wants and putting that right up the front, so it's something to see on the first page.
What shouldn't be included on a resume? Date of birth, gender. People can't discriminate these days, but you don't want to eliminate that step if you have it on your CV.
What doesn't need to be included on a resume that I've seen over the years creates unconscious bias is where you live. I don't need to know your address straight up the front unless it's part of the, another recruitment form. I think seeing people over the years going, oh, they live in that suburb, can create unconscious bias. Your age, unless it's a job that needs to be 18 plus, I think that creates bias around age as well. There's some of the things I think can really stamp out. We just want to see your name, some contact details, and that sort of stuff are really critical. I don't need every job that you've done on there unless it's relevant to the role. You can put them on there and recruiters might ask, oh, there's a bit of a gap in between these two jobs that you've left on there. You can then explain going, well, I had a job, it wasn't relevant to this, so I didn't put it on there. They'll understand from there. So there's some of the things I think cuts out the unconscious bias and helps give you a better shot for the role.
Honestly, in terms of what shouldn't be on a resume, I don't really have a list of what I don't want to see. I think this really comes back to a common sense approach as well, and looking at what's the organisation that you're applying for, what's the role that you're applying for. Anything that's not relevant to that, I think you can scrap. Because again, I want to make sure that when I'm reading through this, is I know that everything that's on there has some form of relevance to the role that you're applying for. So look, I'd say to people, use your common sense in this aspect. I'm not a big fan of photos on resumes as well, personally. I know that we do come across them every so often. Your LinkedIn profile URL is going to have a photo of you on there anyway. So I think for me personally, keep the photos off there, keep the information relevant, and you should be all right.
I prefer a resume to be no more than 4 pages. That's still quite long. I feel 4 pages, if you've worked over many years, great. 3 is good, but if you can get it succinct down to 2 pages, that's really good and clean.
I believe that a resume should be as concise as possible, so trying to list your previous employment skills and achievements as well as that objective within 1 page. So if you're outlining your duties, your scope and your roles, you should be able to fit those on 1 page. I generally like to see 1 to 2 pages at the most. It just gives the recruiter a good understanding of your previous experience in a flash shot, because a lot of the time recruiters will, they won't go spend so much time looking at your CV, so it's really good to kind of grab their attention and summarize your previous employment in that 1 page, 1 to 2 pages.
So 2 pages max. The thing is when you're looking at CVs and you're picking it up on the other end, you kind of screen through a lot of if you've got more than 3 or 4 or 5 pages. We don't want 4, 3 or 5 pages. We just want the most relevant information compressed in 2 pages. It just makes it so much easier, because keep in mind that when we pick up CVs, we have many more to go through. So if you highlight the fact that you're of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander descent, you already go into the pile, because that's what we're targeting. And then having the 2 CVs gives us a snapshot of your work experience, what you've done, your capabilities, and then also that is the gateway into us phoning for an interview.
So my preference around length of a resume, I think comes back to the nature of the role that you're applying for, and again, the relevant kind of roles and skill sets that you've developed over there. In terms of listing off, I like in the last 3 years of history to be a little bit more detailed in terms of your role, and again, what of your achievements in that role and what were your actually responsibilities with that role. Anything kind of outside of that 3-year mark, I still like to see maybe what you've done, but you don't have to go down to that level of detail. And again, I kind of look at the first page at what those recent roles are, and then there's not much more for me to look at off the back of that. So again, keep it short, sharp and sweet, and to the point.
It's really important to tailor your cover letter and resume for each role that you're going for, just to make sure that the recruiter understands that you're really interested in the role, so they can invest that time understanding who you are and why you're interested in this role, it just really gives them the impression that you've studied the role, the position description, the duties, responsibilities, as well as the organization. So when that is specific, it really calls out to the employer or hiring manager.
I think tailoring your resume for each application is super important nowadays. In 2022 now, we have AI that are actually screening a lot of candidates' resumes, and these AIs are built off the back of their individual organizations, values, behaviors, keywords as well. So I think to be able to do that effectively is you need to understand what the role you're applying for is, understand what the organization you're applying for is. And again, this might sound time consuming, but it's going to be worth it at the end of the day. We've got less recruiters now with more roles, so AI is just a screening tool. And if your resume could be the greatest resume on earth, if it doesn't align with the organization or with the role, you're actually never going to make it to the recruiter. So I think, again, take the time, understand what your role is, and make actions accordingly. And again, you don't have to revamp everything, but have a look at what's the terminology, what's the language that are being used, and make sure that your resume is fitted to that.
Look at the key selection criteria in the job ad, and then tailor it with the other jobs that you've worked before that might relate to those skills. It gives you a better opportunity to really stand out.
It's very important, simply because every job is different in what they are seeking, but it doesn't mean that you're not the right person. It just means that you need to transition or have those transferable skills from each of those jobs that's aligned to the values of the company and what you bring to the table, which is what we want to see and what we want to know, and that's what we will discuss at the interview process. But it is very, very important. You have to make it relevant. If you see a CV and it has something from one industry, yet we're stepping into another industry and it's misaligned, well then that kind of goes, well, the person's probably not suitable for this role because they can't demonstrate those things. So you need to customise your CV every single time, tailoring it to the role, tailoring it to the business, and put your best foot forward.
A cover letter is really important to be that first impression. You can summarize everything you want in your resume in that cover letter. So, 3 paragraphs can really summarize who you are, what type of person you are, why you are the best candidate for the role. But it's a really great opportunity to use buzzwords. So look at you, if you're going for a company, look at their website, look at the things that they use. They might have their core values on their website. See if you can intertwine that into your cover letter, because that really stands out, because then the recruiter can really relate to that person by seeing those buzzwords from the values that align with their corporation or their company.
I believe that a cover letter is imperative to your application for any role. I know a lot of people don't really enjoy cover letters, but when I say it is so important to include a cover letter, I do mean that. It is really a way that you can outline your experience and also who you are as well, including, your personality that will shine through on a cover letter. So it's really important. It's a way to kind of grab the recruiter or the hiring manager's attention. I believe that every cover letter I've written has greatly contributed to my success in gaining a role, as I, make sure that I'm putting the most amount of time into my cover letter.
I think depending on the nature of the role is to whether a cover letter is important or not. I feel like the more senior in roles that you're going, a cover letter may be more important, because we're trying to capture who you are and what's the point of difference in terms of what you're bringing to the role opposed to the next person, which again is hard to gather from just a resume when we're looking at purely roles and whatnot. So I think at entry level or at lower level management, less important in my opinion, because the role is pretty straightforward in terms of what we're looking for as well. And again, as we get into more niche or specialist kind of roles, I think you're trying to separate yourself. And that's not to say never do one, because it's always a great opportunity to be able to showcase yourself. But I think also being real in there as well as that, I could read a lot of resumes and it's kind of looks like a bit of a copy and paste job, and it's a bit generic and whatnot. So if you're going to do it, make sure you do it well and it's really personable to yourself, and again, really aligned to the role that you're going for.